Every year, my family would get a family photo taken. We would always go to the same place, the local park. We then all stand in front of the large oak tree and pose for that year's family photo. Every year, we would always ask our close family friend, Terry, to take the photo. It was our one tradition that we would follow every year as a family. We followed this tradition for over 15 years. My family isn't really what you would call a close family, we all get along well enough, but we have always been too different from one another to ever have a really close bond. Despite this, though, the day we would take our family photo would be the one day of the year that I could feel a real sense of unity and we really felt like a close family. My family consists of me, my mother, my father, my younger sister Samantha and my older brother Jake. 5 of us in total. Me and my siblings always had an alright relationship growing up. We fought often, but we always found a way to forgive each other, before starting our next argument. Over the years, however, we began to drift apart. I think as we got older and got more responsibilities in life, we all found it too difficult to maintain our relationship with one another. Jake had a few kids and moved to a different state, and Samantha became a fairly successful lawyer and so was always very busy. Both of my parents have since passed away as well, so in terms of family, I don't really have any now. When my parents passed away, they left everything to us 3 kids and then we divided it up between each of us. Somehow, I ended up with all of the family photos that were taken throughout the years. Maybe I was missing my family or maybe I was feeling nostalgic. But whatever it was, I decided that I wanted to look through the old family photos and reminisce on years gone by. I went up to the old desk that is sitting inside of the small study room and opened the top drawer. Inside, there was a large pile of old papers that I hadn't been through for many years. I searched through the old bills and the old letters, looking for the photos that I knew I had placed in this drawer. I had to search through all of the paper, and at the bottom of the drawer sat the small stack of photographs of me and family standing in front of the old oak tree. I gathered them up and closed the drawer, before heading out of the study and sitting in the armchair that is in my lounge room. I looked down at the photograph that was on top of the pile. I remembered that years ago I had placed the photos in chronological order, and so the photograph on top, the earliest one taken. I was about 3 in the photograph. My parents were both standing behind me and my brother Jake was next to me. Samantha was not yet born yet, so she didn't make an appearance in this edition of the family photo. I flicked through the photos, watching me and my brother grow older in each one and then seeing my sister making an appearance in the 4th photo. I then saw both me and my siblings grow into older kids, then teenagers, and just as I was beginning to look like a man, the photos ended. I knew why the photos ended there. It wasn't because we were getting too old for it. I knew it was because my parents would no longer be able to be in them, and I don't think us kids felt right about taking the photos, if our parents would be absent from them. I was looking at the last photo. I was looking at both of my parents in the images, looking back at their smiling faces. Smiling because they didn't yet know what would happen to the 2 of them. Then, something caught my eye. Behind the back of both my parents, between the branches of the old oak tree, a man was standing in the background, facing the camera and smiling. He was a very strange-looking man. He had long gray hair that hung around the side of his head, but he was balding on top. He was missing a number of teeth, and so his mouth was mostly a gaping black hole. His eyes, however, were probably the strangest thing. They almost appeared red, but that must have been because of the flash of the camera. I laughed a little bit to myself, thinking that we had been photobombed. I then finished flicking through all of the photos and so was back at the beginning. I was about to put the photos back in the drawer, but that's when I saw it again. I saw him again. The same man, standing in the same spot behind my parents. The man looked the same age as he did in the previous photo, even though this one was many years earlier. He also had the same expression on his face, staring and smiling at the camera. His eyes were also the same shade of red as they were in the previous photo. I was a bit worried at this point. How could he appear in both photos that were taken 15 years apart? I then looked at the next photo, and standing behind the oak tree and behind my parents was the same man, looking exactly the same, his eyes still red. I then started to flick through each photo once again, and in each photo, in the same spot, stood this mysterious stranger. The more I looked, however, the more I began to think he wasn't smiling at the camera, but instead was laughing at my family standing there. I didn't know who this man was, and I didn't know why he was always standing between my parents and watching my family. I tried to think of different rational explanations. Maybe this man knew that we took a photo every year and so planned to always be in the background of the photo. Or maybe, it was one of my parents' friends, playing a joke on us. I managed to convince myself that it was someone my parents knew, and they were just playing a joke. This helped comfort me enough and helped me try and forget what I had seen. I decided to turn on the television to further take my mind off of it. I switched it on and watched whatever was on for an hour or two, but that's when it happened. The words, "breaking news," appeared, interrupting whatever sitcom I was watching. The newsreader began to speak and an image of a man I knew all too well appeared on the screen. "Terry Sturt, convicted murderer, has died today," the newsreader said, as the image of Terry, my parents' close friend and the photographer of all of our family photographs, appeared on the screen. He died in his cell after a long battle with cancer. Terry was convicted back in 1996 of the murder of Edward and Teresa Barter. The newsreader continued, as a photo of my parents flashed up on the screen. Terry Sturt has always maintained that he was innocent, and today, in a deathbed confession, he revealed who he believes is responsible for the death of what Terry calls his closest friends. Terry claims that the man responsible is a man by the name of Paul Randling. However, 7 News can reveal that Paul Randling had long since been dead before the murders of Edward and Teresa Barter took place. The newsreader finished speaking and the sitcom I was watching began to play once more. I couldn't get the man out of my head, though. Paul Randling, Paul Randling, Paul Randling, my brain repeated over and over. I hadn't heard of the name before, but I had to know who it was. I pulled out my phone and opened Google and typed the name, Paul Randling, into the search bar and then hit search. Most of the results were for Facebook profiles of people with that name. After a bit of searching, however, I managed to find an article with the name, Paul Randling, in it. I began to read. Murderer, Paul Randling, will face life in prison. 5 February 1943. Paul Randling has today been sentenced for the hideous crime of a double murder. He has been convicted of murdering a young couple in cold blood. The couple's names cannot be revealed, but it is known that they have left behind 2 young children. Randling, 58, will be facing life in prison for his crimes and will likely never see the outside of a jail cell ever again. Underneath the article was a small drawing of Randling and it was unmistakable. This was the man in the photograph, that was standing behind my parents. I didn't know what this meant. How could this man, that was jailed in the 1940s, be in the background of all of my family photographs? I decided to look at the photos once again, just to make sure it was the same person. I picked up the small stack of photos and looked at the one on top, but the man was no longer standing behind my parents. He had moved. I looked through all of the photos and it was the same in all of them. He had moved from behind my parents. He was now standing right behind me.